The blaring emergency alert finally subsided, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. Cale Mercer rubbed his tired eyes, feeling the tension of the past 12 hours in every muscle. Stardust Mining Outpost 12 had weathered worse cosmic dust storms, but this one had been particularly vicious, battering the external panels and clogging filtration systems throughout the station. As the station's air filtration maintenance engineer, Cale had spent the entire storm monitoring system pressure levels, replacing overloaded filters, and redirecting airflow from damaged sectors. Now that the emergency had passed, he needed to check for external damage before allowing himself rest. Exterior inspection protocol initiated. Cale muttered to himself as he suited up. The ritual of speaking aloud had become a habit in his 3 years of solitude on Outpost 12. After losing his family in the Helios transport disaster, he had sought the isolation this remote asteroid belt station offered. Here, among the rough miners, corporate overseers, and assorted misfits, he could exist without expectation or pity. Stepping into the deserted maintenance corridor, Cale moved with practiced efficiency toward the external hatch. Most residents were still sheltering in the central sectors as protocol dictated. It would be hours before life on the station returned to its grim normal. The cold hit him first when he stepped into the loading bay. The environmental systems were still recalibrating after the storm. His breath fogged as he moved between stacked supply crates toward the external doors. Activating his helmet shield, he initiated the decompression sequence and stepped out into the asteroid's barren surface. The view never failed to humble him. Above, stars pierced the absolute blackness with unwavering brilliance. Below, the rocky surface was scoured clean by the recent storm, exposing metallic veins that had made this particular asteroid valuable enough to warrant human presence. Cale methodically began his inspection, moving along the station's outer hull, noting minor abrasions and one dented panel that would need replacing before the next storm. He was nearly finished when he noticed it, a strange discoloration near the waste disposal units. Something partially buried in cosmic dust that didn't match the asteroid's natural composition. Approaching cautiously, Cale swept away the fine particles with his gloved hand, revealing what appeared to be fabric. Not station-issue material either. His heart rate quickened as he uncovered more. The fabric belonged to clothing, and the clothing contained a body. A living, breathing body that flinched away from his touch. "Hello," Cale said, though he knew his voice wouldn't carry in the vacuum. He shifted his position to see better and found himself staring into the most extraordinary eyes he'd ever encountered. Large, amber-colored orbs without pupils that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. The face around those eyes was distinctly feminine, but unmistakably not human. Pale green skin stretched over delicate features, marred by small cuts and bruises. Cale's training took over. He made deliberate, slow movements to appear non-threatening, pointing to his breathing apparatus, then to her, checking for signs of respiratory distress. The alien woman seemed to understand, shaking her head slightly and pointing to a small device at her throat, some kind of personal atmosphere converter. It looked damaged but functional. She was clearly terrified, pressing herself against the metal waste container as if trying to become invisible. Her thin frame trembled, whether from cold, fear, or hunger. Cale couldn't tell. Probably all three. Making a quick decision, he unclipped an emergency ration bar and a small water container from his belt. He extended them slowly toward her, then placed them on the ground between them when she didn't reach for them. Cale backed away several paces and waited. The standoff lasted nearly 5 minutes before hunger apparently won out over suspicion. With lightning-quick movements, the alien woman snatched the offerings and retreated to her previous position. She examined each item carefully before consuming them with desperate efficiency. Cale watched, mind-racing. She couldn't survive out here. The next storm might hit within days, and she had no proper shelter. The temperature drops alone could kill her. But bringing a non-registered alien aboard the station violated at least 6 corporate regulations and 2 interplanetary laws. Still, as he watched her lick the last crumbs from the wrapper, her amber eyes constantly darting to his face and back to her surroundings. Kale knew he couldn't leave her to die. Rules be damned. He pointed to himself, then to the station door, then extended his hand toward her in invitation. She stared, unmoving. He repeated the gesture, adding a gentle nod. After what seemed like an eternity, she rose shakily to her feet. She was shorter than he'd expected, barely reaching his shoulder, her body thin beneath the tattered clothing. Kale led her to the airlock, constantly checking over his shoulder to ensure she followed. Inside the chamber, as atmosphere was restored, he could hear her rapid breathing. When the inner door opened, she hesitated, her alien eyes scanning the corridor beyond. "It's okay," Kale said softly, though he doubted she understood his words. "I won't let anyone hurt you." The station's night cycle provided cover as Kale guided his unexpected guest through seldom-used maintenance corridors toward his quarters. Twice they had to duck into recessed doorways to avoid other residents, pressing close together in the shadows until the danger passed. Each time, he felt her trembling intensify. When they finally reached his small apartment, Kale sealed the door with relief. The alien woman remained just inside the entrance, amber eyes scanning every detail of the sparse living space. The single bed, the compact kitchen unit, the desk cluttered with technical manuals, the small viewport showing the star field beyond. "You're safe now," Kale said, removing his outer gear. He gestured to the room, then to her. "You can stay here." She made no response except to retreat to the farthest corner, sliding down to sit with her back against the wall, knees drawn to her chest. In the better light, Kale could see more details. The intricate patterns in her skin that he'd initially mistaken for bruising were actually subtle markings, like natural tattoos. Her hair, which had appeared black outside, showed deep blue highlights under the artificial lighting. Kale moved around the small space, gathering a spare blanket, a ration pack, and a medkit. He placed them midway between them, just as he had done outside, and backed away. The silence was broken only by the constant hum of the air filtration system, the system that had been Kale's only companion for 3 long years. As he watched the alien woman cautiously reach for the blanket, wrapping it around her shoulders with a barely perceptible sigh, Kale wondered what cosmic coincidence had brought her to his doorstep, and how his carefully constructed solitude would survive her presence. The first 3 days passed in tense silence. The alien woman. Kale had taken to thinking of her as his guest in his internal monologue, ate sparingly from the rations he offered, slept fitfully in the corner she'd claimed, and watched his every movement with those extraordinary amber eyes. Communication was limited to gestures and the occasional single word she seemed to understand. Food, water, sleep. She startled at unexpected noises. The chime of Kale's communication device, the automatic cycling of the air system, the distant clang of machinery from other parts of the station. On the 4th day, Kale returned from his shift to find she had moved from her corner. His initial panic subsided when he spotted her at his viewport, staring out at the stars with an expression he could only describe as longing. She didn't flinch away when he approached, which he counted as progress. "Beautiful, aren't they?" he said, looking out at the same view. "I wonder if any of them is your home." She turned slightly toward him, studying his face. Then, to his surprise, she pointed to a faint reddish star barely visible at the edge of the viewport. "There? That's your home." She shook her head slightly, then made a sweeping gesture with her hand, as if to indicate a region of space rather than a specific star. She touched her chest lightly and spoke for the first time, a word in a language unlike any Kale had heard, musical and flowing. "Is that your name?" he asked. After a moment of apparent consideration, she responded, "Lyra." The word sounded carefully formed, as if she was translating or approximating for his benefit. "Lyra," Kale repeated, smiling. He pointed himself. "Kale, Kale," she echoed, the name sounding exotic in her lilting accent. That small exchange broke something in the invisible barrier between them. Over the next week, their communication gradually expanded. Kale noticed Lyra preferred softer foods, and that bright lights seemed to cause her discomfort. He adjusted the room's illumination to a warmer spectrum and found an old cushion to make her corner more comfortable. In return, Lyra began to help in small ways. She straightened his tools after he'd been working. She folded the blankets with precise, geometric patterns. One evening, Cale cut his hand while repairing a ventilation panel he'd brought back to his quarters. Before he could reach for the medkit, Lyra was there, her cool fingers carefully cleaning the wound, applying antiseptic with surprising gentleness. It was the first time she had deliberately touched him. "Thank you," he said, surprised by the catch in his voice. Human contact, even non-human contact, was something he hadn't realized he'd been starving for. Lyra's response was a soft sound, almost like humming, that somehow conveyed understanding. Later that night, as Cale was drifting to sleep, Lyra spoke again. Her voice came quietly from her corner, hesitant but determined. "My ship, destroyed. Many dead. I escaped. Small pod." Cale sat up, not wanting to interrupt this first offering of her story. "Port Diamond. Drifted long time. Found this place. Accident. You were on a refugee ship?" Cale asked gently. Lyra was silent for so long that Cale thought she wouldn't answer. Finally, she said, "My people. Scattered. Hunted. Some experiment on us. Some sell us." She touched her throat where the breathing device sat. "Our bodies. Valuable. Parts. Valuable." The implication turned Cale's stomach. "No one will hurt you here," he promised, though he knew it might be a promise he couldn't keep. Not on Outpost 12, where resources were scarce and humanity often showed its ugliest side. "Why help?" Lyra asked, her amber eyes reflecting the dim light. "No benefit for you. Dangerous." Cale thought about his answer carefully. "Because 3 years ago, I lost everyone I cared about. I know what it's like to be alone." Lyra seemed to absorb this. After a long moment, she nodded, a gesture she must have learned from watching him. "Alone. Hurts." "Yes," Cale agreed. "It does." The next morning, Cale found Lyra had moved from her corner. She had arranged her blanket on the floor nearer to his bed, still maintaining distance, but no longer as far as possible. It was a small change, but its significance wasn't lost on him. That evening, after returning from his shift, Cale brought her a warmer blanket he'd managed to requisition by claiming his quarters had a heating malfunction. He also brought a small data pad with visual language learning programs. "I thought this might help us talk better," he explained, showing her how to use it. Lyra took the device carefully, her fingers tracing the screen with curiosity. She looked up at him and, for the first time, held his gaze directly. "Thank you, Cale," she said clearly, each word careful but confident. Something warm and unfamiliar expanded in Cale's chest. Maybe it was just the novelty of hearing his name spoken by another being after so long. Or maybe it was the way Lyra had begun to sleep more peacefully, no longer curled defensively in her corner, but stretched out on her makeshift bed, her breathing deep and regular. Whatever it was, Cale realized that Lyra's presence had somehow transformed from an unwelcome disruption to a quiet companionship he hadn't known he was missing. 2 months after finding Lyra huddled against the waste containers, Cale was beginning to believe they might actually make this impossible situation work. Lyra now spoke standard with reasonable fluency, though her musical accent remained. She had created a concealed sleeping area using storage containers and spare fabric, giving them both some privacy in the cramped quarters. Cale had established a routine. He worked his shifts, occasionally volunteering for extra hours in low-traffic areas of the station to deflect attention from his increasingly frequent returns to his quarters. He gathered supplies gradually, extra rations here, a spare clothing item there, nothing that would draw notice if taken individually. What he couldn't have anticipated was Magda Korloff's nosiness. The elderly widow lived across the corridor and seemed to have nothing better to do than monitor the comings and goings of her neighbors. Cale had always been polite but distant with her, which had been enough until now. "Your environmental system's still giving you trouble, Mercer?" she asked one evening as Cale returned with an extra blanket tucked under his arm. "Just some temperature fluctuations," he answered, trying to sound casual. "Nothing serious." Magda's eyes narrowed. Funny. I reported similar issues last month, but maintenance said the entire sector was functioning normally. Couldn't find any anomalies. Maybe it's just my unit then, Kale said, keying in his door code. I'm handling it. Are you? Magda peered at him. You've been looking better lately. Less. Haunted. Found something to live for again, have you? The question hit uncomfortably close to the truth. Just keeping busy, Kale muttered, escaping into his quarters before she could ask anything else. Lyra was sitting cross-legged on her makeshift bed, the data pad in her lap. She looked up at his entrance, her expression immediately alert to his tension. Someone suspects? She asked quietly. Not exactly. Just a nosy neighbor. Kale ran a hand through his hair. But we need to be more careful. Lyra nodded, returning to the data pad. Kale noticed she was studying the station schematics he'd downloaded for her, memorizing escape routes. He realized with a pang. 3 days later, Kale's worst fears materialized. He returned from his shift to find Lyra huddled in her corner again, amber eyes wide with fear. Someone saw, she said before he could ask. Through viewport. Female. Older. Magda, Kale muttered. What happened? I was checking filters, like you showed me. Lyra had taken to performing small maintenance tasks in the apartment while Kale was away. Forgot to close privacy screen. She was outside, saw me. Made noise, pointed. Ran away. Kale's stomach clenched. How long ago? 2 hours. I hid since then. That wasn't good. 2 hours was more than enough time for Magda to spread the word. Kale's mind raced through possibilities, none of them promising. His communication device chimed, displaying an incoming message from station management. That answered one question. Magda had gone straight to the authorities. Required. Immediate presence of Engineer K. Mercer at Administrative Office 1. Subject, unauthorized occupancy violation. Kale showed the message to Lyra. I have to go, he said. Stay here. Keep the door locked. If anyone but me tries to enter, use the emergency exit we practiced and head for the maintenance shaft on level B. Lyra reached out, touching his arm lightly. If I leave now, you're not in trouble. No, Kale said firmly. We're past that point. I'm not letting you go. The walk to Administrative Office 1 felt like a march to execution. Kale noticed the stares, the whispers behind hands as he passed fellow residents. News traveled fast in the closed environment of the station. Station manager Huxley was waiting, along with security chief Dawson and a visibly smug Magda Korloff. Huxley's perpetually sour expression was even more pronounced than usual. Engineer Mercer, he began without preamble. Resident Korloff has reported an unauthorized alien presence in your quarters. Care to explain? Kale straightened his shoulders. I found a survivor from a destroyed ship. She was injured and would have died without assistance. I provided shelter in accordance with basic humanitarian principles. Without reporting to station authorities, Dawson cut in. Without medical quarantine, security clearance, or proper documentation. She posed no risk, Kale argued. And given the station's record with non-human visitors, I had concerns about her treatment. Huxley's thin lips compressed further. Our record, as you put it, is in strict compliance with Corporate Directive 55B regarding non-registered alien encounters. All such encounters must be reported immediately for proper processing. Processing, Kale repeated flatly. You mean detention, interrogation, and likely deportation to a corporate research facility. That's not your concern, Mercer, Dawson said. Your concern is the list of regulations you violated. Unauthorized resource allocation. Failure to report a security incident. Harboring an undocumented alien. Each carries serious consequences. The alien will be taken into custody immediately, Huxley continued. As for you, Mercer, your case will be reviewed by the administrative board. Until then, you're suspended from duties and confined to quarters. Your original assigned quarters, which will be searched and cleared of any unauthorized occupant. She has a name, Kale said, anger rising. It's Lyra. She's a refugee whose ship was destroyed. She's harmed no one. She's been helping maintain my quarter systems. She has rights under the Interplanetary Sentient Protection Act. Magda snorted. Protection Act doesn't apply to corporate territories. Everyone knows that. Enough, Huxley snapped. Security will accompany you to your quarters to retrieve the alien. Lyra, Cale interrupted. To retrieve Lyra, Huxley continued with obvious distaste. She will be housed in the detention sector until proper authorities can assess her status. This is non-negotiable, Mercer. Cale's mind raced. Fighting would only make things worse. He needed time to think, to plan. I understand, he said finally, but I want to be present during her transfer and detention, to ensure her proper treatment. Huxley and Dawson exchanged glances. Fine, Dawson said eventually. But one wrong move, and you'll be in the cell next to hers. The walk back to his quarters, flanked by 2 security officers, was even worse than the walk to administration. Word had clearly spread. Residents lined the corridors, some curious, some hostile. Someone had scrawled "Alien Lover" on his door in red paint. Cale entered his access code with steady hands, though his heart hammered. The door slid open to reveal nothing. His quarters were empty, Lyra's makeshift bed abandoned. Where is she? Dawson demanded, shoving past Cale. Relief washed through him. She'd escaped as they'd planned. I don't know, he answered truthfully. She must have heard something and gotten scared. Lock down all exit points, Dawson barked into his communicator. Full search protocol. Section by section. While the security team tore apart his quarters, Cale silently mapped Lyra's most likely escape route in his mind. If she followed their contingency plan, she'd be heading for the rarely used docking bay where several decommissioned life pods were stored. It was a long shot, but their only chance. You're making a mistake, a new voice said from the doorway. Cale turned to see Chief Engineer Alvarez, his direct supervisor. The older man rarely left the engineering section and was notoriously indifferent to station politics. This doesn't concern you, Alvarez, Dawson said without looking up from his search. When you harass my best maintenance engineer and cause a station-wide panic over a harmless refugee, it absolutely concerns me. Alvarez stepped fully into the room, especially when that refugee helped identify a critical flaw in our filtration system that could have killed everyone within 6 months. That got everyone's attention. What are you talking about? Huxley demanded, appearing at the doorway. Alvarez crossed his arms. 2 weeks ago, Mercer submitted an unusually detailed analysis of particulate accumulation in the secondary filtration system, a pattern that suggested a microscopic fracture in the main processing chamber. Not the kind of thing our standard diagnostics would catch until catastrophic failure. Cale kept his face carefully neutral. He had indeed submitted that report based on Lyra's observations. Her species apparently had heightened sensitivity to air composition and flow patterns. So he's good at his job, Dawson shrugged. Doesn't change the fact that he violated regulations. That report didn't come from standard diagnostics. Alvarez continued as if Dawson hadn't spoken. That kind of analysis requires specialized sensory capability that humans don't possess. I did a little digging after receiving it. Found that certain species in the Proxima system have exactly that capability. Huxley's expression wavered between annoyance and concern. Are you suggesting this alien? Lyra, Cale, and Alvarez corrected simultaneously. That Lyra somehow detected a system flaw our equipment missed? Not somehow. She definitely did. Alvarez pulled a tablet from his pocket, displaying a cross-section of the filtration system with a hairline fracture highlighted. We confirmed it yesterday. Would have taken us months to find it on our own, probably after people started getting sick. Or worse. A heavy silence fell. Cale caught Alvarez's eye, seeing the slight nod there. Whatever game the chief engineer was playing, Cale was grateful. One good deed doesn't negate the violation of corporate directives, Huxley finally said, though with less conviction. No, Alvarez agreed. But it might be worth considering that this particular alien has proven valuable rather than dangerous. Corporate appreciates value. Huxley, you know that better than anyone. More silence, as Huxley visibly calculated the political implications. Finally, he sighed. The search continues, but I'll contact headquarters regarding alternative processing options. It wasn't much, but it was something. As the others filed out to coordinate the search, Alvarez lingered behind. Thank you, Cale said quietly. Alvarez grunted. Don't thank me yet. They'll still find her, and this place isn't known for its hospitality toward outsiders. He glanced around the ransacked quarters. You've got a tough choice ahead, son. What do you mean? Management might be persuaded to let her stay in some capacity, given her unique abilities. But it would be under constant supervision, limited freedom. Essentially glorified servitude. Alvarez's weathered face showed rare emotion. Or she could leave, and you with her, if you're willing to give up everything. The choice crystallized in Cale's mind with surprising clarity. You know about the decommissioned life pods? It wasn't a question, but Alvarez nodded anyway. 8th Bay, locked storage section C. Access code is my birth date, 2184. Pod 3 has been partially restored. It's not much, but it would get you to the Galileo trading outpost if you're careful with the fuel. A pause. If you were thinking of doing something that's stupid, which I'm certainly not suggesting. Cale absorbed this, understanding the enormous risk Alvarez was taking by sharing this information. Why help us? The older man's expression softened momentarily. I had a daughter who would have been about your age. She married a non-human. They lived in the frontier colonies. His use of past tense told the rest of the story. Before Cale could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Security breach in Section E7 announced the automated system. Containment protocols initiated. Section E7, the Environmental Control Center. Not where Lyra should have been if she'd followed their escape plan. That's not part of her backup plan. I'm guessing, Alvarez said. No, Cale admitted, dread filling him. She was supposed to head for the docking bay. Well, she went the opposite direction. And E7 is about to be flooded with security personnel. Alvarez checked his tablet. You better move fast. Cale didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted from his quarters, ignoring the shouts behind him. The corridors were chaos. Residents hurrying to designated safe areas. Security personnel barking orders. He used the confusion to make his way towards Section E7, taking maintenance shortcuts where possible. He reached the Environmental Control Center to find emergency lights flashing and the main door sealed. Through the reinforced viewport, he could see figures moving inside. One of them was unmistakably Lyra. Cale pressed the external communication button. Lyra, what are you doing? Her voice came through distorted by the speaker. Fixing mistake. Making trade. What mistake? What trade? Cale scanned the corridor, knowing security would arrive any moment. Secondary system failing now. Not 6 months. Bad calculation. She paused, and Cale could see her pressing buttons on the main control panel with surprising confidence. I fixed it, let me go. Or let me stay. But you not in trouble. The realization hit him. Lita, no. We had a plan. We can still get out together. They find me anyway, she replied, her musical voice tinged with sadness. This way you safe. Inside the control center, warning lights suddenly ceased, replaced by steady green indicators. Lyra had apparently succeeded in whatever repair she was attempting. Almost immediately, the main door began to cycle open. Cale lunged forward as soon as the gap was wide enough, forcing himself through. Inside, he found Lyra standing calmly beside the main filtration control panel. Behind her, 2 maintenance technicians watched with expressions of awe and confusion. You need to come with me now, Cale said urgently, grabbing her hand. There's still time. Lyra squeezed his hand but shook her head. Look, she said, pointing to the main screen. It displayed real-time atmospheric data for the entire station, with a critical warning that had been steadily climbing for days suddenly decreasing to safe levels. The microfracture was worse than your friend thought, explained one of the technicians. We were hours away from catastrophic failure in the primary chamber. She just knew exactly where the problem was and how to reroute the systems while sealing the breach. He shook his head in disbelief. She saved the station. Heavy footsteps in the corridor announced security's arrival. Dawson burst in, weapon drawn, with 4 officers behind him. Freeze, he ordered, then took in the scene with confusion. What's happening here? What's happening? Came Huxley's voice as he pushed his way into the increasingly crowded room. Is that we nearly had a station-wide environmental disaster. He glanced at the control panel, where all indicators now glowed reassuring green. And apparently, our unauthorized visitor just prevented it. The next few hours passed in a blur of debriefings, technical explanations, and tense negotiations. Kale refused to leave Lyra's side, despite multiple attempts to separate them. Chief Engineer Alvarez's presence provided essential credibility to their account of events. Finally, in a private conference room, Huxley laid out the station management's position. In light of the services rendered to the station, I've received authorization for a conditional arrangement. He slid a tablet across the table. The alien, Lyra. Kale interrupted automatically. Huxley's mouth tightened, but he corrected himself. Lyra can remain on Outpost 12 in an official capacity as an environmental systems consultant, under the direct supervision of engineering. She will be granted basic resident privileges, excluding voting rights or travel authorization. Kale quickly scanned the document. And the conditions? She will wear a tracking device at all times. She will submit to weekly medical examinations. She will have no access to communication systems or restricted areas without express permission. Huxley's expression made clear his personal opinion of this arrangement. Any violation of these terms will result in immediate detention and transfer to corporate headquarters for processing. Lyra, who had remained silent throughout the meeting, finally spoke. And Kale? What happens to him? Engineer Mercer will be placed on probation for 6 months, with reduced privileges and a formal reprimand in his file. Huxley's tone suggested he considered this extremely lenient. Again, any violation of station regulations during this period will result in severe consequences. Kale exchanged glances with Lyra. This wasn't freedom, not really. It was a gilded cage at best, with constant monitoring and limited rights. But they would be together, and they would be alive. May we have a moment to discuss? Kale asked. Huxley nodded curtly and left the room, followed by the others, leaving Kale and Lyra alone. It's not what we hoped. For, Kale said quietly, taking her hands in his. But it's better than running with minimal supplies in a half-repaired life pod. Lyra's amber eyes studied his face. You still lose much. Because of me. I lost everything that mattered to me once before, Kale replied. I won't do it again. Not voluntarily. Lyra was silent for a long moment. Then she reached up to touch his face gently, her cool fingers tracing the line of his jaw. Then we stay. For now. For the next 3 months, they adapted to their new reality. Lyra worked closely with the engineering team, her unique sensory abilities revealing previously undetected issues throughout the station's environmental systems. Grudging respect from her colleagues slowly replaced fear and suspicion. Kale continued his maintenance duties, now including regular joint projects with Lyra. They were assigned adjoining quarters, small but official recognition of their relationship. The tracking device on Lyra's ankle was a constant reminder of her conditional status, but at least they were together. Not everyone accepted the situation. A small but vocal group of residents continued to treat Lyra with suspicion or outright hostility. Graffiti occasionally appeared on their door. Anonymous complaints were filed about resource allocation inequity. But the majority of the station's population gradually moved from tolerance to acceptance, especially as environmental quality noticeably improved under Lyra's guidance. Then came the transmission. A routine deep space scan picked up a fragment of a message in a language no human translator could decipher. But Lyra recognized it immediately, her native tongue. My people, she whispered, listening to the garbled audio. They survived. They're gathering, regrouping at a place called Sanctuary. The message included coordinates, far beyond the reach of any transport available at Outpost 12, but not impossible to reach with a properly equipped vessel. For days, Lyra was distracted, torn between the pull of possibly reuniting with her people and her life with Kale. For his part, Kale struggled with his own conflict, wanting Lyra to have the chance to be with her kind again, yet terrified of losing her. What do you want to do? He finally asked one night, as they sat looking out their viewport at the stars. I don't know, she admitted. I thought I was the last. To know others survived. She turned to face him. But you're my home now, Kale. You saved me when no one else would. You risked everything. And I would do it again, he said simply. But I don't want to be what holds you back from finding your people. The decision was made for them a week later when a corporate transport arrived at the station. Among its passengers was a special corporate envoy, a thinly veiled designation for high-level security officers tasked with sensitive situations. Chief Engineer Alvarez warned them immediately. They're here about Lyra. Someone higher up learned about her abilities and wants her transferred to the research division on Ganymede. They're calling it a specialized consulting assignment, but we both know what that means. The research division on Ganymede was notorious for its exploitation of non-human biological capabilities, often through invasive and destructive methods. When? Kale asked, already calculating escape routes. They're meeting with Huxley now. The transfer order will be presented tomorrow morning. Alvarez looked grim. You got about 12 hours. They moved quickly. Kale gathered essential supplies while Lyra systematically disabled her tracking device in a way that wouldn't trigger immediate alarms. Alvarez provided access codes and blocked routine security scans of the docking bay. By midnight, they stood before Life Pod 3, a small, battered vessel that had seen better days. Alvarez had kept his word. The pod had been partially restored with functional life support and propulsion systems. It's programmed with the coordinates from the transmission, Kale said, checking the navigation system one last time. Enough fuel for the journey if we're careful. Lyra touched the pod's hull with something like reverence. Our new beginning. You should know, Alvarez said quietly, overseeing their final preparations. Once you leave, there's no coming back. Not to any corporate territory. They'll flag you both as fugitives. Kale nodded, the reality of their decision settling heavily on his shoulders. We understand. Thank you for everything, Chief. Alvarez gruffly waved away the gratitude. Just get that pod moving before the morning shift. And Mercer, he added, extending his hand, take care of each other out there. It's a hard universe. They clasped hands briefly, a lifetime of unspoken understanding passing between them. Then Alvarez turned to Lyra, surprising her with a respectful nod. Your people should be proud of you, wherever they are. Tears shimmered in Lyra's amber eyes as she returned the gesture. I will remember your kindness. Always. With final checks complete, they boarded the small vessel. The interior was cramped, barely enough room for 2 people and their minimal supplies. Kale took the pilot's seat while Lyra settled beside him, her slender fingers tracing the unfamiliar controls with natural curiosity. Ready? Kale asked, his voice steady despite the fear churning inside him. Lyra placed her hand over his. Together, she said simply. The launch sequence was agonizingly slow. Each clank and hiss of the ancient mechanisms seemed loud enough to alert the entire station. Finally, the outer doors of the launch bay slid open, revealing the star-filled void beyond. With a gentle push from the maneuvering thrusters, Life Pod 3 drifted out of Stardust Mining Outpost 12, the place that had been Kale's prison and sanctuary for 3 years, and Lyra's temporary haven. They were free. The first days of their journey passed in anxious vigilance, constantly checking sensors for signs of pursuit. But as the distance between them and the mining outpost grew, tension gradually eased into a different rhythm of shared existence. The cramped confines of a life pod forced an intimacy that might have been uncomfortable under other circumstances. But for Kale and Lyra, it felt natural, a continuation of the trust they had built in his small quarters. Tell me about your world, Kale said one cycle as they shared a ration pack, the autopilot guiding them through a particularly dense asteroid field. Lyra was silent for a moment, her eyes distant. It was beautiful, she finally said. Oceans like liquid sapphire. Forests with trees taller than your station towers. The air smelled of spices and salt. She gestured to the viewport, where stars glittered against blackness. 3 moons, all different colors. We call them the sisters. What happened? Kale asked gently. Resource competition. The usual story. Bitter sadness tinged her musical voice. My people are peaceful by nature. We were unprepared for the aggression of others who wanted our world's resources. Many died in the initial conflicts. The rest scattered across the stars, seeking sanctuary wherever they could find it. Kale thought of his own loss. Family killed in what was officially termed a navigational malfunction, but widely suspected to be corporate sabotage to eliminate competing transport lines. "I understand," he said simply. Lyra's cool fingers found his. "I know you do." On the 10th day, warning alarms jolted them from sleep. A micrometeoroid storm had damaged one of the external sensor arrays, causing a slow air leak. The next several hours were a frantic race against time as Kale worked outside the pod in a patched-together EVA suit while Lyra guided him from inside. Her exceptional sensitivity to air pressure proving invaluable in locating the minuscule punctures. When the crisis passed, they collapsed together in exhaustion, bodies pressed close in the narrow sleeping berth. "We make a good team," Kale murmured against her hair, which carried a subtle scent like cinnamon and ozone. "Yes," Lyra agreed, her voice sleepy. "Better together than apart." It was in these moments of shared danger and quiet recovery that their relationship deepened beyond the initial bonds of rescuer and rescued. Lyra began teaching Kale word from her native language, beautiful, flowing sounds that human vocal cords could only approximate. In return, he showed her old Earth games like chess, adapting the rules to their limited resources with makeshift pieces crafted from spare parts. Physical intimacy evolved naturally, tentative touches growing more confident as they discovered the similarities and fascinating differences between their species. Kale found the luminescent patterns on Lyra's skin changed subtly with her emotions, glowing faintly in the pod's dim night cycle. Lyra was entranced by the variety of textures in human hair and skin, spending hours simply running her fingers along Kale's arm or through his hair. "Your people have no concept of personal space, do they?" Kale teased one day, as Lyra pressed against him to look out the same viewport. "My people believe separation is illusion," she replied with surprising seriousness. "All life connected. Physical boundaries just convenient fiction." The philosophy resonated with Kale more than he expected. In the vastness of space, artificial distinctions seemed increasingly meaningless. Their journey wasn't without complications. Twice they had to alter course to avoid commercial shipping lanes where corporate patrol vessels might detect them. Once they powered down completely for nearly 40 hours to evade a military survey craft that crossed their path. Food and water required careful rationing. The pod's recycling systems operated at minimal efficiency, requiring constant maintenance. Yet despite these challenges, or perhaps because of them, they found a contentment neither had experienced before. "I never thought I would feel this way again," Kale admitted during their 4th week of travel, as they drifted in a quiet sector between systems. "After losing my family, I convinced myself that the only way to survive was to feel nothing, connect with no one." Lyra, who was using a small tool to etch delicate patterns into a piece of salvaged metal, a traditional art form from her culture, looked up at him. "Grief makes walls, shields against more pain." "Exactly, but you somehow got through those walls." She smiled, the expression lighting her amber eyes. "Not me alone. You let me in. Brave thing, to open again after great loss." As they approached the coordinates from the mysterious transmission, anticipation and anxiety mounted. The navigational system indicated they were heading toward a small planetoid in an unremarkable solar system. No registered habitations or mining operations, nothing to attract attention from major powers. What if they're not there? Kale voiced the fear they both shared. What if the message was old or a trap? "Then we find another way," Lyra said with simple conviction. Together, the planetoid grew from a distant speck to a looming presence, its surface mottled with deep craters and what appeared to be vast cave systems. No obvious signs of habitation were visible, but their sensors detected faint energy signatures emanating from beneath the surface. "Clever," Lyra murmured. "Underground, protected from storms and scanning." Following the strongest energy reading, they guided the pod toward a particularly large crater. As they descended, what had appeared to be natural formations revealed themselves as camouflage structures, dwellings and infrastructure built to blend perfectly with the surrounding terrain. They sat down near what seemed to be an entrance, a shadowed opening in the crater wall. For several minutes, they simply waited, uncertain of their next move. Then movement caught their eye as figures emerged from the entrance, approaching cautiously. Lyra pressed her hands against the viewport, eyes wide. "My people," she whispered, voice breaking. "They're alive." The approaching figures did indeed share Lyra's distinctive features: green-hued skin, large amber eyes, slender builds. They carried no visible weapons, but moved with deliberate caution. "Should we go out?" Kale asked, suddenly uncertain of his place in this reunion. Lyra turned to him, sensing his hesitation. Together, she reminded him firmly, taking his hand. They cycled through the airlock and stepped onto the planetoid's surface. The gravity was lighter than standard, making each step feel buoyant. The air, though thin, was breathable without assistance, evidence of atmospheric engineering. The group of aliens stopped several meters away, studying them intently. One stepped forward, an older female with intricate patterns covering much of her visible skin. She spoke in the lyrical language Kale had been learning, too rapid for him to follow. Lyra responded, her voice trembling with emotion. The conversation flowed back and forth, occasionally punctuated by gestures toward Kale or the life pod. Finally, Lyra turned to him, eyes shining. "This is Eldernaria. She says we are welcome here. Both of us." Kale bowed slightly to the elder, who regarded him with keen interest. "Thank you for your welcome," he said carefully in Lyra's language, using phrases they had practiced. The elder's expression shifted to something like approval. She responded in heavily accented but understandable standard. "One who learns our tongue is rare. One who saved our daughter, rarer still." The group led them through the cave entrance into a marvel of adaptation and ingenuity. The underground settlement extended deep into the planetoid. Natural caverns expanded and reinforced to create living spaces, hydroponic gardens, water reclamation systems, and communal areas. Everywhere, the same clever camouflage principles were applied, technology integrated so seamlessly with natural formations that it was often difficult to tell where one ended and the other began. "We call this Sanctuary," explained Naria as they walked. "One of several settlements across different systems. We stay hidden, scattered. Safer that way." "How many survive?" Lyra asked, still taking in the scale of the settlement, which housed perhaps 200 of her people. "Perhaps 10,000 across all havens," Naria answered. "Few enough to hide, enough to survive as a culture." They were given a small dwelling of their own, a beautiful space carved into living rock and illuminated by bioluminescent plants that cast a gentle, shifting light reminiscent of underwater scenes. The community welcomed them with a shared meal featuring foods unlike anything Kale had ever tasted, fruits with complex, layered flavors, proteins with textures that changed as they were consumed, beverages that seemed to enhance rather than dull the senses. Throughout the celebration, Kale noticed the curious, sometimes wary glances directed his way. He was, after all, a member of one of the species that had contributed to the destruction of Lyra's homeworld. Yet there was no hostility, only careful observation. Later, in the privacy of their new home, Lyra explained, "My people judge individuals, not groups. You risked everything to help me. That speaks louder than any history." In the days that followed, they settled into the rhythm of the community. Kale's engineering skills proved valuable in maintaining and improving the settlement's environmental systems. Lyra reconnected with her cultural traditions while serving as a bridge between Kale and her people. They learned that Sanctuary was more than just a hiding place. It was an attempt to preserve what remained of their civilization while adapting to a new reality. Children were taught both traditional knowledge and practical skills for survival in a sometimes hostile universe. Art, music, and storytelling flourished alongside technological innovation. One evening, about 2 months after their arrival, Lyra and Kale sat at the edge of a subterranean lake that provided much of the settlement's water. Bioluminescent organisms drifted beneath the surface, creating patterns of light that reflected on the cavern ceiling. "Are you happy here?" Lyra asked suddenly. Kale considered the question seriously. "I never expected to find peace again after what happened to my family. Certainly not in a cave on a nameless planetoid with 200 aliens." He smiled at her. "But yes, I'm happy. This place, your people, they've given me something I thought was lost forever. A sense of belonging." Lyra leaned against him, her skin cool against his. "Sometimes I wonder if we should have stayed on your station, fought for our place there. We would have lost," Kale said with certainty. "Corporate interests always win those battles. Here, we have something better than fighting for scraps of recognition. We have freedom." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the gentle lapping of water against stone. "Elder Neria asked me something interesting today," Lyra said eventually. "She asked if we would consider a bonding ceremony. A marriage, in your terms." Kale turned to her, surprised. "Is it something you want? Among my people, bonds between souls are recognized regardless of origin. It would be unusual, but not unprecedented, to bond with someone not of our kind." Her amber eyes studied his face. "But I need to know if you would ever wish to return to your own people, to have a human family." The question struck at fears Kale hadn't fully acknowledged. The possibility that Lyra might someday regret choosing him over a partner of her own species, someone who could give her children who shared her heritage. "My people, as you call them, gave me nothing but solitude and pain after I lost everything," he said slowly. "You gave me purpose again, a reason to live instead of just exist." He took her hands in his. "If your people will accept me, then this is where I belong. With you." The bonding ceremony took place 3 weeks later, combining elements of Lyra's cultural traditions with symbols meaningful to Kale. They stood together in the community's central gathering space, surrounded by glowing crystals that amplified the natural light. Lyra wore intricate patterns painted on her skin in luminescent pigments, traditional designs symbolizing union and continuity. Kale wore a simple garment woven with threads that caught and reflected light in ways that complemented Lyra's natural luminescence. Elder Neria led the ceremony, speaking first in her native tongue, then repeating key phrases in standard for Kale's benefit. They exchanged vows that transcended cultural differences, promising partnership, respect, and loyalty through whatever challenges they might face together. The final act of the ceremony involved each drinking from a shared vessel containing water from the subterranean lake mixed with a small amount of a sacred plant extract. The liquid tingled on Kale's tongue, creating a momentary sensation of expanded awareness in which he felt unusually attuned to Lyra's presence beside him. "The bond is recognized," Neria declared, "not just by our community, but by the greater consciousness that connects all living things." The celebration that followed lasted well into what passed for night in the underground settlement. Music unlike anything Kale had ever heard filled the air, complex harmonies produced by instruments that used the natural acoustics of the cavern to create immersive soundscapes. There was dancing, feasting, and a ritual where each community member presented the newly bonded pair with small tokens of blessing. One presentation especially moved Kale. A young female child, perhaps the equivalent of 8 Earth years, shyly approached with a small carved object. It was a replica of LifePod 3, rendered with surprising accuracy in pale stone. "For remembering journey that brought you together," she explained in careful standard, clearly practiced for this moment. The simple gift crystallized something in Kale's mind. The recognition that their harrowing escape had become part of this community's shared story. The human who risked everything for one of their own would be remembered in their oral traditions, perhaps long after he was gone. 6 months after arriving at Sanctuary, Kale and Lyra had fully integrated into the community. Their dwelling had expanded to include a workshop where Kale developed hybrid technologies, combining his human engineering knowledge with a more intuitive, organic approach favored by Lyra's people. They had begun teaching, Kale offering classes in practical mechanics to younger community members, Lyra working with a group studying interspecies communication and diplomacy. One ordinary day, as Kale was returning from an expedition to salvage materials from an abandoned mining site on the planetoid surface, he found Lyra waiting for him with an unusual expression. "What is it?" he asked, setting down his collection of salvage parts. "A signal," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "From human space. Elder Neria thought you should hear it." In the communications center, a surprisingly sophisticated setup despite its organic appearance. Neria and several technicians waited. They played the intercepted transmission without comment. It was a standard commercial broadcast, the kind that preceded cargo shipments to frontier areas. But the content sent a chill through Kale. Following the tragic environmental system failure at Stardust Mining Outpost 12, Corporate Resources has announced the complete evacuation and decommissioning of the facility. All personnel have been relocated to neighboring stations. The incident, which claimed 37 lives including station manager Huxley and Chief Security Officer Dawson, has been attributed to critical maintenance oversights. Kale listened in shocked silence. The station, his home for 3 years, the place where he'd found Lyra, was gone. And with it, people he had known, worked with, even those who had made their lives difficult. "When?" he asked hoarsely. "Transmission dated 3 weeks ago," one of the technicians replied. Based on propagation delay, the event occurred approximately 2 months ago. 2 months. They would have still been there if they hadn't fled. They would have been among the casualties. Lyra's hand found his, squeezing gently. "The failure in the primary chamber," she whispered. "The one I repaired temporarily. It must have finally given way," Kale agreed numbly. "Or someone made a mistake in the maintenance routine after we left." Later, alone in their dwelling, the full impact hit him. He sat heavily on their sleeping platform, hands shaking slightly. "They're dead because we weren't there," he said, voice hollow. "Because I chose to leave rather than fight to stay." Lyra knelt before him, her amber eyes searching his face. "Or they're dead because the station management chose profit over proper repairs for years. Because they valued control over safety." Her cool hands framed his face. "We cannot carry that burden, Kale." He knew she was right, logically. The station's systems had been deteriorating long before they left. Proper repairs would have required significant investment that Corporate Resources had always been unwilling to make. But the guilt remained, the nagging sense that his skills, combined with Lyra's unique abilities, might have prevented the tragedy. "I keep thinking about Alvarez," he admitted. "He helped us escape. He probably died because of that system failure. He made his choice," Lyra said gently, "as we made ours. To honor him is to live fully in the freedom he helped give us." That night, they joined a small gathering at the edge of the settlement where the cavern roof opened to the sky above. It was a monthly ritual of remembrance and renewal, a time when the community acknowledged losses while celebrating continued life. Under the distant stars, Kale spoke Alvarez's name aloud, along with those of his family lost years before. Lyra added names from her own past, parents, friends, mentors who had perished when her homeworld fell. Together, they released glowing seeds of a native plant that drifted upward on warm air currents, temporarily joining the stars above before settling elsewhere on the planetoid's surface to grow anew. The symbolism wasn't lost on Kale. Life continuing, taking root in new places, adapting and evolving, just as they had done. 1 year after their arrival at Sanctuary, the community gathered to witness another significant event. The launch of their first long-range scout vessel. Built from salvage parts, indigenous materials, and innovative hybrid technology developed partly through Kale's contributions. The small ship represented a shift in philosophy from pure hiding to cautious reconnection. Not to return or reclaim, Elder Neria explained at the dedication ceremony, but to seek other survivors, to establish communication between havens, to create a network of safety and shared knowledge. The ship's crew included 4 of Lyra's people and, somewhat surprisingly, Kale himself. His experience with human technology and systems made him invaluable for a mission that might encounter a variety of species and situations. The planned journey would last 3 months, visiting coordinates where other refugee groups might have settled. The night before departure, Kale and Lyra stood on the surface of the planetoid, looking up at the vast array of stars above. The same view that had once represented emptiness and loss to Kale now held possibility and connection. "Are you nervous?" Lyra asked, her arm linked with his as they absorbed the cool night air. "A little," he admitted, "but it feels right, helping your people reconnect, using my knowledge of human space to keep them safe." He turned to her. "Are you sure you're okay with staying behind?" Lyra nodded. "My place is here for now, helping prepare for whatever you discover." Her hand rested lightly on her abdomen, where the first signs of their impossible miracle had recently been confirmed. Against all expected biological barriers, life had found a way. A child with characteristics of both species now grew within her. The medical specialists were cautiously optimistic, having discovered that the sacred plant used in their bonding ceremony had unexpected properties that facilitated genetic compatibility. The pregnancy was being carefully monitored, but so far, both Lyra and the developing child were healthy. "I'll be back long before the birth," Kale promised. "Nothing could keep me away." "I know." Lyra's smile held complete confidence. Our paths joined that day by the waste containers. They cannot truly separate now, no matter the physical distance. As they stood under the stars, Kale reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them here. From a chance encounter during a cosmic dust storm to creating a new life together on a hidden world. A journey that began with one simple choice to show kindness to a stranger in need. "She was hungry, homeless, and alien," he murmured, echoing words Alvarez had once used to describe their situation. "And somehow that changed everything. For both of us," Lyra added softly. "Sometimes the universe shows unexpected mercy." Kale drew her closer, feeling the perfect rightness of her presence beside him. Whatever challenges lay ahead, the upcoming mission, the birth of their child, the uncertain future of their adopted community, they would face them together, just as they had faced everything since that first fateful night. Above them, the endless stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the boundaries and divisions created by those who live beneath them. In one tiny corner of that vastness, two beings from different worlds had found in each other something rare and precious. A home that transcended physical location, a connection that defied biological differences, and a love that had given them both a second chance at life.